name's Ross Matthew Ellison. I'm 29. I'm turning 30 this year. I feel very old. My occupation, my day job or what I want to be doing, because those are two different things. So I guess my day job, I'm just doing whatever I can to make money, and my occupation is creating a publishing company and writing books. When I was little, I hated reading, actually, and I hated writing even more. Mostly because my handwriting was junk, and so I had to write things like 10 times over. But then my grandma, who I dedicated my first book to, handed me The Hobbit. And she said, it's not that you hate reading, you're just reading junk. And then handed me a good book, and then I never stopped reading after that. What really drove me towards writing was when I grew up reading Harry Potter. I was like, this magic system, it sounds cool, and it sounds dangerous, but let's be real. Death spells, mind control, torture, come on, we can do better than that. So I started writing my own stories, so I could do better.
Ross came to me a few years ago and asked me if I would edit a novel that he was working on. So when we began working together, Ross would send me the pages, and I would edit the pages for grammar and then content, sometimes suggest ideas on how to resolve story arc issues and stuff like that. And we would just go back and forth. And so I've edited a few things for him since then, and that's kind of the way our relationship is. He sends me stuff, I give input and make changes, and you know, he generally likes what I do, so he keeps the changes.
Well, we like to bounce ideas off of each other. If Ross has an idea for a character and he wants to go over it, he'll throw the idea at me, I'll think it over for a bit, tell him what I think about it, and vice versa. Oftentimes he'll tell me certain plot points he's planning before he actually ends up writing them down, asks me if he thinks that makes sense, if it'll be good, maybe how to tweak it. And sometimes when he's doing edits, he will show me his work in advance, and I'll point out little things here and there that I notice.
So I think forwardness is probably the most important and notable thing anyone notices, is just that most people don't have to try to figure out who I am. I have no problem telling you who I am. And I like forward planning. I like to plan steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 before I think of 1, 2, 3, and 4. Usually to not so great a benefit. And I usually like to... I'm called a schemer sometimes. I tend to have that look when I'm thinking that I'm like plotting something.
Ross is a unique personality. As most people know, he has a couple of challenges in his life, and so he's very focused. He's like I said, he's very focused. It can be very intense sometimes, but if you take that into account, Ross is a good guy, and I think that shines through as well. He's very creative. He's a very creative person. Matter of fact, one of the biggest imaginations of anybody that I've ever met.
So my writing style is I like to shock the reader without it feeling cheap. I like to make you wonder what's going to happen when you turn the next page. You're not going to know whether a character's going to die, whether they're going to be driven nuts, whether they're going to learn some new spell that's going to help them save someone, or they're going to fail to save that person after learning the spell that they thought was going to save the world. You got to keep the reader guessing.
It's interesting. I mean, he definitely keeps you guessing. I feel like it's always interesting to read his stuff when he first writes it, just to see his thought process as things go on.
Sometimes you get an idea just from being in the right place at the right time. I wanted to write a story that was in swamps, so I visited the Everglades because I wanted to be in the swamp. I wanted to smell the swamp. I wanted to get stung by mosquitoes in the swamp because I wanted every single thing I could think of that you'd encounter in a swamp, and I didn't want to miss anything, so I went to a swamp.
Ross is pretty out there. I think a lot of people know a lot of things about him because he doesn't really hold back. He's obviously, into video games, things like Pokemon and stuff like that. He's obviously a writer. He has a huge imagination. As I said, Ross, no matter what Ross is working on, he's also working on the sequel to that and the sequel to that sequel. So he thinks really far ahead in his story arcs and stuff like that, which I think is incredible and admirable. I'm doing good if I can remember what I had for breakfast this morning, And Ross is already talking about the characters that that are going to happen in the novel after the next novel. So I don't know if people know how far ahead he thinks, in his stories, but he thinks pretty far ahead. He's kind of like a chess guy who's always thinking 12 moves ahead.
For the last year, I've been writing a Dungeons and Dragons campaign story like companion with it, and then I started turning those into actual stories. So the last story I published is a novella, because I was told by a mentor that sometimes if you can't get a bestseller, just flood the market with tons of books, and then you have tons of products to choose from now. And that I'm trying that approach. So this story starts a lot more lighthearted than my usual work, because I like baiting the reader and making them think they're safe. It features a very dysfunctional party that seems to have lots of memory issues, and they're going on a journey to who knows where. They're just kind of trying to avoid this obnoxious giant that just won't leave them alone. Keeps, like, every time they try to buy, like, drinks or anything, he'll go into the bar, set it on fire, or he'll try to poison a town's well. Just things that make it so that it's impossible for them to do anything like normal people would. And every time they try to run away from him, he follows them. What a lot of people tend to consider writer's block, it doesn't strike me as much as some people, and it's a challenge that I don't seem to have as much difficulty overcoming, because when I get stuck on a story, I just move to another one. Right now I'm working on like 5 different projects, so I just keep jumping between them. I know that you're never supposed to wait for inspiration, but sometimes I'm just not feeling it. Sometimes I have to skip the order I'm writing stories in, because I tend to get bogged down in exposition, and I just don't want to write any more of it, and I want to get to the action, but you can't do that in some stories. You have to write that exposition, otherwise the fight doesn't matter, because you don't care about the characters. I think the most important thing with writing is not to get bogged down in the rules of how to write. I think so many writers get stuck, thinking, oh, has someone done this idea before? Is this even worth writing? Is this worth reading? And I always remind people, Cinderella's been written over 1,000 times, but every author's telling their own version of the story. So even though you could retell a story, it's you telling it, so it's a different story.
I think there's a lot more to Ross than just his writing. I mean, Ross is politically minded. He's very passionate about his politics. Ross is also a family guy, and he's also interested in supporting things like his religion. He's Jewish, and so I see Ross being very active in a lot of different ways, trying to help the community as well as trying to further his own career. So, I think there's a lot to learn about Ross, and I hope that people take the opportunity to do that.